Okay, on to the last feature of erosion. This is going to be the shortest one, but it's going to kind of bring everything together a little bit. All right, so wind causes erosion. It's the least effective agent in erosion compared to water, ice, things like high elevation, that sort of stuff. But it still is an agent in erosion. So we have deflation and abrasion when we think about wind erosion. So deflation is when it's picking up small pieces, but I want you to think a little more about that. Really, what deflation is when it's picking up the smaller pieces in an area. So the wind comes by, it picks up this small sediment, but it still leaves behind this large rock sediment here, or these large pieces of rock. So the area still has a mass, but it's losing its mass. It's just losing all the smaller pieces of the mass. That's what deflation is going to be. And then abrasion is when that that wind that picks up those small pieces of sediment hits something like a rock. It's going to sandblast that rock. So just think of sandpaper. When you take sandpaper to something, you're helping to erode that surface. So that's what abrasion is. So abrasion is basically the effect of deflation. So deflation is when the wind comes by, picks up small pieces, it takes away sediment from its source, and then as the wind gets stronger, picks up, it's going to keep those sediment pieces inside of it. It's going to hit some sort of hard surface, and it's going to abrade that surface. So here's just a really good picture of deflation and abrasion. So as the wind comes by, it's going to pick up these smaller pieces of sediment, and then with that wind picking up that sediment, it's going to hit these pieces of rock, and you see how the top is kind of eroded away in pretty much a parallel pattern here. So you can kind of make a line straight through here, and you can see that this same area has been eroded, and that's due to that deflation and abrasion. So deflation picked up these particles, it moved them over this rock quickly, and it abraded that surface. So this surface has been subjected to the weathering force abrasion due to deflation. Here's that process of differential weathering here. We got some deflation. This wind picked up. It took some sediment from the source around here. That sediment was carried. It hit this surface with abrasion, so it sandblasted this surface. The harder parts on top stayed. The softer parts on the bottom kind of got eroded away. And then the higher you go, typically in like a desert area, the higher you go, the less abrasion there's going to be as well, because wind can't carry things quite as high because they're denser than the wind in the air, so they're going to fall down. So typically you get a lot of abrasion down here closer to the surface, but this is also due to differential weathering. So we get wind deposition as well. So with weathering and erosion, there's always going to be some sort of deposition at the end of it. And then the deposition typically associated with wind is going to be sand dunes or low deposits. So it looks like lows or los, but it's low. And that's when wind picks up fine sediment, and then it like kind of hits the side of a cliff or something, and it gets deposited on that side of a cliff, and then it just builds up. And really what that is really fertile, fine sediment, so really nutrient-rich sediment. It helps to make the land around it fertile. So as it builds up, it's also going to fall down and create kind of like an alluvial fan effect, if you remember what that was. So here's a good example of a sand dune. The wind's coming through here. It's using deflation to bring sediment over here, and it's depositing it. And then there's also deflation going on throughout the tops of these sand dunes as well. That's why you get these lines here on the surface. And then here is just a bunch of low. So we've got some wind bringing in a bunch of really fine, nutrient-rich sediment. It's going to hit the side of this cliff, and then it just kind of builds up. And then eventually, due to like water erosion or some more wind erosion, this is going to kind of fall down, create an alluvial fan, and then at the bottom of this is going to be really, really fertile soil. So you're going to get kind of like a nice fertile ecosystem right in this valley here. So that is all that you're going to need to know for wind erosion. For the quiz and the test, if you want any supplementary information, go ahead and let me know. Otherwise, have a wonderful week.